Let's talk about politics. There is a lot going on in politics going on at the moment. We've got the EU, Donald Trump, the French elections, but don't worry, we're not going to talk about them. Today I want to talk about a topic that's kind of slipped out of the foreground recently, and that's electoral reform. Now, this will be a video about British politics, so to anyone out there who's unfamiliar, here's how our system works. Currently, we elect a local Member of Parliament, or MP, to represent us in the House of Commons. There are 650 regions, or constituencies, who each send one MP. The MPs are elected on a first-past-the-post system, which means quite simply whoever gets the most votes wins. The party who has the most MPs in Commons at the end of it, well, they win the election overall, and their leader goes on to become Prime Minister. Overall, it's a very simple system, but it does have huge flaws. Anyone who followed the election in 2015 will know the problem with first past the post. The Conservatives won 51% of the seats on just 36% of votes, and UKIP, despite getting 12% of those votes, only got one seat. That's nearly 4 million UKIP voters to one MP. Now, you might be wondering why this happens. Well, imagine the UK was not split up into 650 constituencies, but 3. Constituency A has 35 million voters, and B and C have 15 million voters each. Election time rolls around and everyone in A votes for Conservative, but B and C vote for Labour. Now, when we tally it up, the Conservatives have 35 million votes and Labour have 30 million votes. However, Labour won the most constituencies, so they win the election overall. This even came to an extreme in 1951 when the Conservative Party won the whole election on a minority of votes. In fact, they were 1 million votes away from having that majority. And this isn't the only fault with the system. It often leads to one party dominating government with the opposition having little effect. And to top it all off, many votes are wasted, and this doesn't just mean people who voted for losing parties, people who voted for winning parties in excess. Their votes won't make a difference either. So we know where we're going wrong, but how do we correct it? First past the post, of course, isn't the only system around these days. There are many alternatives. There are 3 main types of electoral system: plurality, majority, and proportional. Plurality is by far the simplest, that's first past the post. Whoever gets the most votes wins. Majority differs only in the fact that you have to have at least 50% of the vote to win, ensuring, you guessed it, a majority. But proportional systems seem to be where everyone gets excited. Proportional representation, or PR, is where the parties are represented in Parliament in direct proportion to how many votes they gained in the election. There aren't many proportional systems, most notably STV and the regional party list. Let's take a look at STV. STV, the single transferable vote, is already being used in the UK. Northern Ireland use it for their elections. The key difference in STV is that larger than normal constituencies send more than one representative. Voters can rank their chosen candidates in order of preference, and whoever achieves a certain quota of votes wins. I'm not going to go into how we make the quota, we don't need to here. The constituents are left with a more proportional result. As well, more people in that constituency have someone to go to. Currently, if you chose a candidate that didn't win, you've got no one. I'm simplifying STV loads here, obviously. STV has a huge amount of advantages. No votes are wasted because voters who chose a losing candidate have their other preferences taken into account. Because more than one candidate can stand from the same party, they're judged personally and not on the basis of that party. And it's more proportional overall generally. Now, I assume a lot of you will be cheering and whooping at this. Support for these types of proportional systems has grown massively recently. Many people, including a lot of young people, are demanding that it be implemented. But hold your horses. Proportional systems have their own world of problems. PR is one of those things that works fantastically on paper, but not very well in practice. And it's all due to the nature of British politics. It's harsh, it's antagonistic, it's confrontational. Even the layout of the House of Commons itself is designed for confrontation. The government and the opposition stare at each other opposite, primed for argument. The space between them is even laid out, so if 2 people were to stand at either edge and point swords at each other, the tips of those swords would touch. Not exactly a very friendly way of doing things. Sadly, as good an idea as PR is, it doesn't really hold up in this kind of environment. What we need here is one strong, stable government that can push their laws through Parliament by brute force. And one side effect of PR is that with more diverse representation, numbers for the larger parties tend to go down, which gets rid of the idea of that single party government. A government has a few options in a situation like this. One, they can carry on, knowing that without alliances with other parties, most of their bills will be struck down and might even result in them being booted out of Parliament. Or they can form a coalition, and we saw that in 2010. And we saw the problems. The powers in a coalition are decided in post-election deals behind closed doors, and the public has no say. In a time like this, power being allocated behind the scenes doesn't seem very democratic, does it? And more on the local side of things, some PR methods really weaken that bond between constituents and their local representatives. Not that that bond was very strong to begin with anyway, but we don't need it any worse. So PR has its advantages, yes, and its disadvantages, but if it's that much of a gamble, then why should we change it? We've bashed first past the post a lot here, but the ugly truth is it has a lot of advantages that PR just doesn't. First of all, it's clear. It's simple. STV, which we've looked at, and the list system, which we haven't, are, in fairness, both quite complex to understand. As well, first past the post has that ability to produce strong governments that PR just doesn't have. It can make governments that are stable and can get stuff done with ease. Now, some might argue this is a bad thing, having one party in the majority in charge of everything, but the balance of government and opposition is really hard to strike. First past the post also gets rid of the problem of coalitions. It's only failed to deliver a majority twice, once in 1974 and once in 2010. And aside from that, no post-election deals have to take place behind closed doors just to make ends meet. We did have a shot at getting rid of first past the post back in 2011 when we had the referendum on whether or not we should adopt the alternative vote, and that was defeated. Evidently, someone decided that first past the post was good enough. Or they didn't vote for it because they thought their favourite party would lose support. Side note, if you pick an electoral system based on how well your party will do in it, you are an arsehole. No matter what the party, I'm sorry. It's the truth. So we've seen the advantages and disadvantages of both first past the post and proportional systems, but which one do we choose? Or do we have to? The additional member system is a mixed system. And here's why. Voters make two choices, one for a local MP and one for a party. This vote for the candidate is a simple first past the post vote. However, that party vote is from that list system I briefly touched upon. Essentially, before the election, parties compile a list of candidates in order of preference, and then candidates will be allocated in direct proportion to how many votes they received in the election. On its own, this system is as proportional as it gets. The local MPs will represent their constituents, while the ones from the list vote represent no constituency. The big advantage with AMS is that it truly has the best of both worlds. It balances the need for electoral fairness with the need for constituency representation. It keeps alive the idea of single-party government while keeping alive the idea of proportional representation. Not only this, but if they want to, voters can vote for different parties in their two votes. They can make more thoughtful decisions. Of course, though, it does have its disadvantages. The chance of having great proportionality is reduced, constituent representation is weakened because you need larger constituencies to make this work, and let's face it, it's quite confusing. So what is the answer? What is the best system? Well, thing is, no one really knows. The debate is still going on, so I want to know what you think. I don't ask this often, but please leave a comment below. Tell me your opinion on this whole situation. What's your favourite electoral system? Which one do you think would work best? And remember, I've only mentioned a couple of systems in very low detail here, so I've left some links in the description about the ones I mentioned and some others. Comment down below your opinions, and I look forward to having a lovely debate about this whole thing. Oh, and keep it civil. This is not PMQs.